Today is a bit of a strange video because we start off with, what was supposed to be a review of a Fuzz kit build, and then kind of morphs into a looking at point-to-point wiring on Fuzz kits, and then really ends with a plea to you guys for some serious help when it comes to building Fuzz circuits, because I feel like the first one that I did, where I was asking the question, well, why don't more people do this? I feel like it was a fluke, because I've hit some serious problems, which you'll see in the video now. So I'm having a go at this kit build from Cricklewood Electronics. Now this is the same build that I did when I first did my original Fuzz phase circuit, but I decided to take all of the components and just do a horrible point-to-point job. It still worked though, and it sounded really good. They've changed it since then, and it's all kind of PCB related, whereas before I think it was strip board or Veriboard or something like that. So it is a different type of build, and straight away I'm confused because we've got some really good detailed instructions around the PCB and around the enclosure, which is good. We've got the components list. But that's it. So looking through the instructions, I'm not sure if I'm going to hit some real problems, to be honest.
So this is the worst bit, the component list, especially if you haven't already got these set out. So I've just set these out based on the colours, so I had to research the colours to find out exactly what they are. Once you've got that done, I think really the rest of it is pretty straightforward. And everything's printed on, which is nice, so that makes it nice and simple. And you feel like you're not making any mistakes, which is really nice.
Now the transistors that I'm using are NPN germanium, new old stock. They're NKT 713, both of them, and they've been matched for Q1 and Q2, which is great, and clearly labelled in the bags. But in terms of which leg is which, there's absolutely nothing telling you which leg is which. Now looking at lots of different diagrams online, you get all sorts of conflicting information, but I've tried to do what I can to kind of guess which leg is which. And more important than that, even figuring that out, which is fine, I think I've done that, it doesn't tell you which leg goes into which part on the PCB. Everything else on the PCB is marked beautifully. Like the polarity of things is marked beautifully, but which leg, in terms of the emitter, the base and the collector of our transistors, the most expensive part of this kit, they cost about £7 each, isn't labelled on the PCB, and I just don't understand how that was a choice that they made. And trying to figure out where all of the tracing goes, because it's on both sides, you can't see it clearly, is really difficult as well, and the tracing is so close to each other in terms of different parts of the circuit. It's an absolute nightmare. So this is really good, this diagram, for getting, all of the off-board stuff sorted, great. But where's the diagram for the most important part of this circuit, or as allegedly what people say, the transistors? It just makes no sense.
Right, so now we're up to another ridiculous part of the build, where because we're using a PCB, the components are going to come through the enclosure in exactly this position, so the spacing has to be exact. Now when I say exact, I mean exact, because these are in millimeters and you're talking to 1 decimal place. So I mean, what hobbyist has a ruler that measures to 1 decimal place in millimeters? It's just ridiculous. So I've done my best to mark out on the enclosure where these are going to go, and we're just going to have to hope and pray that it all lines up in the end. Oh yeah, and I didn't mention that the holes are also decimal points as well. So this is 4.5 mil, and I mean, the drill bits that I'm going to be using for it are in whole numbers. So awesome. So through some absolute stroke of luck, I've managed to actually get that to fit. So nice. Let's do the rest of the holes, and then it'll be a case of just tightening it all up and give it a try. Let's hope it works. So the stupidity of this build continues. So I've done this according to the measurements of where these holes should be for these, and I mean, this is so high up that it kind of crushes straight into where the power supply is coming in. So I mean, I'm going to test that and see if it works, but I mean, it's just a mess. And there's really no reason, because there's all this room down here. Now I can only imagine that they've put this room down here in the hope that you get a battery in, but there is absolutely no way. I mean, when I was putting this on, I was thinking there's no need for this, I'm not going to use this, but there is no way you can fit a battery into this space. So I don't know what they're thinking. This could have come much further down and got out of the way of that, and we wouldn't have that problem. Or taking these jacks a little bit further up maybe, because they're in the way of the switch here. I mean, when the actual lead comes in, it's right in there. I mean, really close, and again, for no reason. So I mean, I'll be amazed if this works. So I've just tested it, and no, it doesn't work. And because there's so many issues with this build, I'm gonna have to try and figure out what it is. Probably most likely the transistors are in the wrong way, so my trying to follow where the signal path is going has not worked, although maybe it could be the power supply. I don't know, but what is a simple circuit has become far more complicated than it needed to be. Right, so I've ripped out this circuit to see if I can see what's wrong with it, and I've traced all my steps and can't see anything at all that I've done wrong.
So this kit build has annoyed me so much that I'm going to essentially rip it apart. I'm going to start building it again, and I'm going to do what I've wanted to do for a long time, and that is learn how to do point-to-point wiring in the proper way. Now, I found a guide online that seems to use pretty much the same circuit. I mean, that's another one of the problems with this kit. It's got some random extra parts that aren't really needed in the Fuzz circuit. It's not the simple circuit that I was hoping that it was. So I'm going to use this new guide to kind of take me along the way. So I'm going to show you my journey on point-to-point wiring and see how that goes.
I must say, there is something very satisfying about putting all of the big components onto the enclosure first, before you start doing any of the smaller components and the wiring. Right, ready for the next stage? how this has turned out. The only problem is I've had what happens to a lot of DIY pedal builders. You go to turn it on and nothing happens. Now looking at the schematic, I can't see anything that's wrong. So what I think has happened is the transistors that I've been using, because I've put them into a PCB and then taken them out again and put them into this, and frankly the legs on it were so short that I had to get right next to the transistor with the soldering iron. I think essentially I've fried those transistors, which is really disappointing. I think that's the only thing that it is. The only other thing that I can think of is the power coming in through the yellow line here, that was originally meant for an LED that I've decided not to put in, so maybe I can take that out. That might be having an effect. If you do know what's wrong with it, you can see from just looking at this what's wrong with it, then please pop it in the comments. But I'm going to go with what I'm instinctively thinking, and that is that I've fried these transistors, so I'm going to swap them out. I haven't got the same transistors with me at the moment, so I'm just going to swap them out for some kind of more generic ones that in theory should work NPN as well. So let's do that and hope for the best. Yeah, that was painful, frankly, removing those. Okay, it's nowhere near as pretty, but hopefully it works. Let's find out. Okay, sit rep. I've got signal, which is great when it turns on, but it is the spittiest fuzz that you can possibly imagine. So I'm thinking that actually the values of these capacitors or resistors need to change. Now looking at diagrams online, the resistors when used with these two seem to be fine, assuming I've got these in the right order. I think I have. Whereas this capacitor here, which is a 10NF dipped polyester capacitor, in the diagrams that I've seen, I think is like a 0.01 or something like that. It's a huge difference. So I think I've got one of those. I think I ordered one of these when I originally got these transistors. So I think it's one of these. So I'm going to try that and see if that makes a difference. Okay, there it is. And it wasn't that. I've just tested it. So still the same problem, unbelievably spitty. So I need to figure out which of these resistors I need to change. I think that's what's going on.
So as you can see, I've got myself into all sorts of a pickle. What I've essentially started doing with this, because it hasn't worked in the way that I wanted it to, is that I've essentially started breadboarding on the actual circuit itself. So rather than actually doing a breadboard, and I do have a breadboard, so I could have breadboarded it, but I didn't. I just went straight for it, again with that kind of naive confidence, arrogance if you like, that I was going to get it right because the first one went right. I've essentially just breadboarded while I've been doing it. Now that's caused all sorts of problems. So I've got to the end of this build, and what I'm calling the end of this build, because I'm kind of done with it at this stage, and I'm really happy that I've learned how to do the point-to-point wiring in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. I feel like, okay, great, tick that box. I'm part way there on this journey, but the actual understanding of the circuit and why my circuit is so quiet, I really don't understand. So the level drop is, when I turn it on, it's something like a tenth of what the amplifier is doing. It's crazy. It's not your normal or slight perceived level drop when you turn the fuzz on. It's a massive level drop, and because of that, and trying to figure out why that is, if it's to do with the resistors, I've tried lots of different things, swapping the resistors out and all sorts of parts. I seem to have just swapped every single part that I can possibly think of. I'm left with a circuit that, I mean, isn't going to work in terms of like using it on the board, but that I'm happy with in terms of my journey of learning things. And I think it sets me up really nicely to do another one, but you know, point to point, because I love the way that looks, but actually getting it right. And this is the part of the video where I'm really kind of pleading to you guys to help me out here. So I feel like I've done a lot wrong in this, but I've decided on the circuit that I want to go for my next one. I've had a go at breadboarding it, so I'm ready to kind of test it out, but I'm a little bit twitchy about testing it out, and I want to know from you your experience of trying one or two of these things. So basically what I've decided to do is I've created a circuit that that won't have a fuzz or a volume knob. So the idea is that then I have a fixed resistor for my fuzz, so the same design, but it would be a fixed resistor, and that I would have then a fixed resistor for my volume as well, because whenever I've had a fuzz face, I've always just cranked the fuzz, cranked the volume, so I don't feel like I really need it. What I really want is a knob for the bias, and now that's the bias coming into for meeting the collector of Q2. And so what I really want from you guys is some advice around how I do that. So if I pop on the screen now my circuit diagram, very crude circuit diagram of my idea of what I want to do. If you've ever tried anything like this, could you pop in the comments what you tried, how it actually went, how it ended up sounding, and any pitfalls for me to look out for, because I would really love for my next project to be to actually work. That would be nice, wouldn't it? So yeah, I hope that in some way that this video was useful to you, kind of deep diving into all of this and getting lost in the maze that can be such a simple circuit. Like I say, please do pop in the comments anything that you've got to say, any advice you've got for me or anything like that. And yeah, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye everyone.